Good morning and welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be talking about the science behind the Rumble fruit. Now just stick around and enjoy the video. Okay, so we're going to be talking about obviously the Rumble fruit and what type of capabilities it can use and what it could actually utilize in the real world if we actually had the Rumble fruit. So like as always with this series, we're going to go over what the basic idea of the particular element or the ability, so to speak, in the real world. And it starts off by a question of what is electricity? Well, electricity is a form of energy resulting from the existence of charged particles such as electrons and protons, either statically as an accumulation of charge or dramatically as a current. To put it simply, it's just a load of bloody energy. And that is basically what I want to explain by just answering that question. Now, as we've seen with Enel's devil fruit, we have pretty much seen him do some amazing types of things. And this has sprung into mind, like, what could the Rumble fruit actually do? Now, we've seen him be able to move fast. That is pretty cool. He can just turn into electricity and go zap and go somewhere. But how fast is he actually travelling when he's using the Rumble fruit? Now, to put it bluntly, if there is no resistance acting upon him, he will go at a maximum of around about 180,000 miles per second. This is an insanely fast speed, and you're probably not likely to catch him because at the end of the day, he will be zapping through the air that bloody fast. Now, obviously, if he were to make contact with you as he is passing through you, he will most likely just zap you. And when we've seen this in the Skypiea arc of when Eneru or Enel actually zaps people with like 1 million volts, and he just goes zzz, and people are down for the count. Yes, you are pretty much being tasered at a very extreme level, so to speak, because a standard taser is around about 10,000 volts on average. But at the end of the day, the volts actually do not kill you. It is the current, or in other words, the ampage, which is passing through you as well. Now, the amps is the form of current going through the electricity, and volts and amps pretty much make up electricity, so to speak. And obviously the amps is also classed as current, or I, in the electrical, if you were going to be doing some electrical physics or electrical engineering, which I am technically trained in. And basically we can use the simple triangle of Ohm's law in order to work out what types of things, like what is the resistance, what is the ampage, and or what is actually hitting them. So I calculated this in as very quickly because it's pretty basically easy to do Ohm's law. And in England our outlets are at 240 volts. Now, the current that we know of that is going through there is around about 13 amps. And this is what we use our fuses for. We get a 13 amp fuse and we put it in there in your plug socket. So obviously if there's a surge, it just burns out the fuse instead of the actual product, so to speak. But using Ohm's law, you can actually work out things like the resistance by getting the voltage and then dividing the volts by the amps, and then that will give you the resistance, which is rounded up is around about 18 ohms, or so we have 18 ohms worth of resistance that is actually acting upon the outlet, so to speak. Now, this accumulates up to around about 3,100 and something watts of power, which is something that we could get into a little bit later on. Okay, so we actually did some calculations, and do you remember when Zoro was getting zapped by Eneru? I actually took the liberty of calculating his sword, being the conductor, if it actually got struck by the actual electricity. And it came up to this. It came up to, if Eneru electrocuted him at 10,000 volts and the iron of the sword is a resistance of 9.71, then the ampage going through Zoro is about 1029.86 amps. I would like to stress this really, really much because that is a lot of amps, and it only takes around about 0.3 milliamps in order to kill someone. So Zoro is very lucky to be alive because he could very well be dead, or he should be dead in the real world. If he actually got struck with this amount of ampage going through him, he's pretty much a cinder crisp. He's gone. He's dead. He's bam. But if there was no current and he zapped him with just volts, Zoro would actually be okay. And this is how we use tasers, because we usually electrocute them through... Because tasers actually work like this. They increase the voltage so much, but resist the actual current going through it in order to not kill the antagonist that you are pretty much subduing with the taser. This is why it is called a non-lethal weapon, because they reduce the current so much but the voltage so high, and it basically acts like a seesaw, so to speak, and it pretty much just messes with your body, obviously, because it's just voltage going through you, like all your muscles will tense up. Believe me, I've been tasered before. It is not fun. I didn't do anything wrong. It was just me and my mates being stupid. But at the end of the day, that is why tasers do not kill you, because the current is so low, the voltage only just zaps you and doesn't actually stop your heart, so to speak. It's the current that really does kill you, opposed to the volts. Now, moving on to that, I actually did some more calculations, and I worked out that how hot Eneru could actually get. So if you remember, one of the Scorpions stabbed him through the head, and he was all electrical, and he was like, "What are you doing, bud? What are you doing?" Yeah, pretty much, I'm pretty confident this guy would have been vaporized, because he is pretty much electricity, and he is completely comprised of electricity, and 3 million volts of electricity is as hot as 30,000 degrees centigrade, or 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a lot of heat coming off of that particular person, or in other words, Eneru, or Enel, or God Enel. But you understand what I mean. He is flipping hot, and his spear would have instantly vaporized upon impact with Eneru. Not only that, he would have actually been electrocuted and or vaporized himself, as the electricity, if not controlled, could actually just spread to him. Now obviously Eneru can control electricity, so he keeps this matter form, but if he really wanted to, he could just spread himself out and just electrify everyone, so to speak. Such as when Smoker can turn into his complete smoke form and spread himself out. This is an absolutely devastating ability, because as hot as he could get, he could literally vaporize anyone attacking him or coming even remotely close to him. This is absolutely insane, and I don't even think Luffy could have coped with that amount of heat, as rubber, the melting point of rubber is around about 180 degrees centigrade, or 356 degrees Fahrenheit. That means when Luffy actually came into contact with Eneru, he would have melted and vaporized into a crisp. This is why Eneru has the most broken devil fruits going, because he has the literal ability of just being able to vaporize anything because of how hot he could get. It's not necessarily how much electricity he can produce. It's more or less along the lines of the amount of power he could create with the current and the electricity combined together. Now this moves on to the power triangle, and the power triangle is volts times by the ampage is equal to the amount of watts or power that you are producing. And to be honest, this is absolutely insane, and you can get into a bit more of the thermals on working out like 30,000 degrees centigrade and all that jazz. But let's be honest, he can do like a 1 million volt bash of electricity. I'm really not worried about how much electricity he can produce, because he is literal electricity, so he can pretty much just create as much as he wants. Now, we did see this when he actually melts the gold. He can melt gold. And when he actually does this, I did a little bit of quick maths, and it came to around about 2,819.54 volts is equal to the melting point of gold. So we now know how much electricity he put into that gold in order to melt it, because gold's melting point is around about 1,064 degrees centigrade. This is quite handy, because this is quite handy in order to actually work out what he was actually doing when he was producing this amount of electricity to actually melt the gold, blah blah blah, and then he actually formed it using that. But not only that, his abilities with electricity are so damaging. He could literally run it round anything, and he could literally make an electromagnet if he really wanted to. Now that is like basic electronics, but in all honesty, in the One Piece world, a big ass magnet with a lot of current going through it would be quite devastating in the middle of a war. So if he actually managed to spiral, as he can control the electricity and the current, that means that he could create some form of electromagnet around people's weaponry and draw it all to him. So somewhat like Eustace S. Kids. He could literally disarm everyone just by increasing the amount of power he's producing with this magnet, and with trying not to actually vaporize the metal in the first place. Personally, I would probably go with like iron, and then try and keep it at that base level and just keep stealing it, but even then it would still melt. So the electromagnet idea is kind of okay, it just depends on how much energy he's putting in there to actually steal them away from people. But at the end of the day, his Devil Fruit is super OP, mainly because he has the ability to just vaporize anything that comes into contact or even remotely near him. This makes him absolutely a god in his own right, and obviously not to boost his ego anymore, but at the end of the day, Eneru is definitely a top tier Devil Fruit user, even though he's a bit of a dumbass sometimes. But other than that, he was actually able to use his Haki and his Devil Fruit in order to increase his observation Haki. That is a pretty cool idea. It's kind of like using a bit of sonar with using electricity in the air. Now, he can actually send communications out without being able to do a Denden Mushi. And this was used by Tesla, and he could actually create electricity using a Tesla coil in order not only to give free energy to the world, but he could also send radio transmissions through that. So he could definitely put it on the frequency the Denden Mushi are, and he could send his own messages to other people using his electricity within the air and producing some form of signal. Now, this could be easily done, as obviously he is electricity, so all they'd have to do is pretty much just think it and send it out in an electrical wavelength, and that would go through the air and attach to a Denden Mushi. If he was able to get the hertz or the band wave or the wavelength that the Denden Mushi are on. This is another ability that is not really more or less fighting, but is more utilizing your ability in order to communicate without having some form of extra thing attached to you. So he can use without a Denden Mushi, he can contact people if he really wanted to. But other than that, guys, that is pretty much all I dug up on the Rumble Fruit. I could go into this a hell of a lot more and what he could do with loads of different types of metals, what he could do with like all that other stuff. But I'm pretty certain I've just explained. But I'm pretty certain that we've covered Ohm's law and a bit of the power triangle as well. So at the end of the day, we can see how much he could actually increase the amount of vaporizing heat he could produce. Not only could he actually send signals out to other people, and he can move at a near on stupid amount of speed in order to attack and fight with. Other than that, guys, have a lovely rest of the day, and I shall see you in the next video next week. Take it easy, guys.